Okay. Uh-oh, didn't like that. Now I decided out of the blue to give me an error about Skype bridge. Start it again. Our next problem is a multiplication problem, and it's rational expressions. So we want to factor the numerators and factor the denominators. So s squared minus 9 is the difference of squares. So it's going to be s plus 3 and s minus 3. Now, my denominator on my left side, if I factor, will be s minus 9 times s minus 3. Now I want to look for factors that are the same in the numerator and the denominator. I can see there's one here. So I can see too that 3 I can divide out of the numerator and the denominator. That would leave me s squared over s, right? So let me just kind of clean it up a little so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Well, s squared divided by s, I know that would be 2 minus 1, I'd be left with s. So my answer is s times s plus 3, all divided by s minus 9. Now our next problem, it's kind of worded a little weirdly, so just make sure you review it a couple times. It says, which of the following formats should be used for the domain of the function? Since we're only looking at the denominator, we don't want the denominator to equal 0. So we're going to always choose for this problem, x is not equal to m. Okay? Now, and then it asks you to fill in the, based on your above choice, to fill this in. So what x cannot be equal to? The way we can find this out is we're going to set the denominator equal to 0. This is what we're trying to stop happening. We don't want this to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve for when x will x squared minus 16 will equal 0. Well, this is a difference of squares. That's x minus 4 and x plus 4. So I'll set each factor equal to 0. And I'll say when x is 4 or when x is negative 4, that it will cause the denominator to equal to 0. So I don't want those to be included because they are bad values. They're going to cause the denominator to equal 0. So I'm going to say that x cannot equal 4 and x cannot equal negative 4. So for yours, you're going to put it in, it says with a comma, like this. And this is what we're going to put in your second part of your question. These values are excluded from my domain. Our next problem, we're adding two rational expressions, and they have the same denominator. We like that. When they have a common denominator, we keep the denominator the same, and we add or subtract the numerators. So in this case, we're going to subtract. Now, be very careful. When you're subtracting, you have to remember to distribute this minus to all three terms. So this becomes 5d squared plus 18d plus 64 minus 4d squared minus 3d minus 8. And our denominator stays that same thing the whole time. Now I want to simplify my numerator. So I look for common for like terms. So I have 5d squared minus 4d squared, and that's going to be 1d squared. So I've taken care of these guys. And I have 18d minus 3d, so that's going to be 15d. And then I have 64 minus 8. That's going to be, what is that, 52? And my denominator, well, that's not right. 64 minus 8 is not 52. That's going to be 56. That sounds better. And then my denominator, I go ahead and write in now because now I need to simplify. My last step is always simplifying, and the way I simplify is I factor, and then I look for a common factor, for common factors to divide out. So using whatever method you like, you can factor these. All right, so I factored my numerator, I factored my denominator. I can see they both have the factor of d plus 8, and I'm left with d plus 7 over d plus 1. Next, we're asked to solve a rational equation. So I recommend getting rid of the denominator for these. So I'm going to multiply both sides by a squared. When I do that, my equation becomes a squared plus, and then if I distribute this, a squared times 4 divided by a will be 4a. And then on the right side, it'll just become 77. So I've eliminated the denominators by multiplying everything through by a squared. Now, I can see it's a quadratic, and to solve a quadratic, I want to have my left side equal to 0, so I subtract both sides by, I subtract 77 from both sides. And now I solve this. So I could use quadratic equation. I could try to factor it. If it factors, that's good, but a lot of times it won't. So you can try whatever method you like. I'm going to go ahead and try to factor it first before I jump to quadratic equation. And try quadratic formula, sorry. So I'm going to say 11 and 7 because I think I see it. And that has to be a plus 11 and a minus 7. So it does factor. So I set each factor equal to 0. And I'll get a is equal to negative 11 and a is equal to 7. Now, you must check your answers. The reason is sometimes you create extraneous solutions, division by 0, and you have to cross them out. So let's just check. So if I put in an 11, a negative 11, I'll put 1 plus 4 divided by negative 11 is equal to 77 over negative 11 squared. And when I check this, I'll see this is true. And then if I did the other one, I would put in a 7. And if I check this, this will also be true. So just make sure that you check your answers. If they're not true, then you need to strike whichever one is not true. Okay, our next problem is simplifying radicals. Okay, so this should not be hard. I'm going to try the hardest one. Let's use C just to show you. So for part C, it says the fourth root of 3072 w to the 7th. So what I do is I make myself a factor tree. Okay. So I'm going to divide by 2 because I don't recognize any other factors. Just use your calculator. And this is going to be, I did that correctly in my head, 1536. I keep going, divided by 2. And this is going to be 768. And then I'm going to divide this by 2. I'll keep going until I finish my tree. You can see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 2s. All right, and then I have 1, 3. And I myself would check this on my calculator. I would write 2 to the 10th power times 3 and make sure that I get the original number just to make sure I didn't miscount or something. Okay? And then I'm going to also write the number of variables that I have, and I have 7 here. All right. Now, whatever my index is, whatever my root is, this is going to be my group size. So I have 4. So I'm going to look for 4 of a kind. I have 4 2s here. I have 4 2s here. 4 W's. Whatever I've circled, one member comes out front, and the rest I discard. One member comes out front, and the rest I discard. And one member comes out front, and the rest I discard. So I multiply any numbers that are outside the radical. So 2 times W is 4W. My root remains the same. If it was the fourth root, it stays the fourth root. And then whatever's left under that I have encircled will go under it becomes a radicand. So 2 times 3 is 12. And then W times W times W will be W to the third power. And that's how you're going to do all of these. Now, when you're entering them into the iMath AS, make sure you read the directions here. They tell you how to enter it. Okay? So for example, for mine, I'm going to write 4W, and then I'm going to write root 4, because it's the fourth root, and then I'm going to write 12W cubed. Right, so maybe practice that when you're doing the practice exam. Make sure you're comfortable entering it, because that's half the battle on this problem, I think.